Hi, I'm Jen from That Mama Book Nook, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be sharing my September TBR list. Just as a reminder about how I do things, this does not include any rollover books because once a book is on my TBR for the year for a certain month, there's a good chance I might not get to it because I put a lot of books on my TBR, but those just keep rolling over until I get to them. So those will not be included in what I talk about today. These are just new books that I'm putting onto my TBR. These also don't include any in-progress books. I also will not talk about any repeat books. So for example, I have like 3 different book clubs that are reading The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I started that with a group read last month. It's a pretty big book, so I didn't finish it, but I will be still reading that this month and likely finish it this month. I believe I talked about it in my August TBR though, so if you want thoughts about any books that I might be currently reading, feel free to go back and check out some of my previous TBR videos. So, September, kids are finally back in school, so hoping to be able to get some more content out there. TBR videos are one of my favorites, so I'm excited to still be able to share what I'm reading in September. The first book that I'm going to be talking about is Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. This I am reading with my local book club, and I grabbed this book from my library. This is following an African-American nurse straight out of nursing school in Montgomery, Alabama in the 1970s. She is going to work for a family planning clinic, so you can already guess that this is like probably a little bit controversial given the time and the location. She is shocked to find that her first patients are 11 and 13 years old, really just children, have never even kissed boys yet. Due to socioeconomic reasons, their family wants them on birth control. Sybil is the name of the nurse. She, really takes these girls under her wing. She takes their families into her life, really becomes quite close with them until one day something terrible happens that kind of changes everything. Then it flash forwards to decades later, and Sybil's own daughter is grown and she is kind of ready to retire and move on and leave the past behind, but is finding it important to share these important stories. So this is obviously a historical fiction novel, which you may or may not know is my favorite genre. I read across all genres, but I have a definite sweet spot in my heart for historical fiction. I also have a background in nursing, so this book seems like I will really be able to connect with it from those angles. This book also has a really high Goodreads rating. It's not brand new, it was published a couple years ago, but so the fact that it still has such a high rating means it was definitely well received. I have high hopes for this one, given everything that I just mentioned, and to top it all off, it was based on a true story. And I just really enjoy when books are, especially historical fictions, have that true story element. Love to learn more about the people that the stories are based on and the time period and just everything that was going on. I just find it so interesting and I really enjoy this type of read. Then the next book that I have on my TBR for September is Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I am reading this with the Introverted Bookish Besties book club on Fable, and I'm going to be grabbing this one from Libby. So this book is a surprise pregnancy novel that is on the cover. In the synopsis, it's not truly a surprise to the reader. It's just a surprise to the main character. But anyway, we're following Eve. She lives in Brooklyn. Her very traditional family lives in the Midwest, but she does live near a very good friend. She's never really felt well understood by her family. Her job is going okay. She wants to kind of take the next step up, but the synopsis does call it dream adjacent, so she's on the right track. Her love life is kind of meh. She's dated a couple lackluster guys. Sounds like nothing too terrible, nothing too exciting, just kind of blah, that didn't work out. But then, somewhat uncharacteristically for her, she has a one-night stand and winds up pregnant. So then this is following her over the next 9 months as she is figuring out where she goes from here. Her best friend that I mentioned, her brother, his name is Shep, kind of steps up to the plate to really help Eve out. He's bringing her lunches. He is an ear to listen to. He is checking in on her. The baby's father is supportive but conflicted, so not necessarily like the greatest help during this time, but again, kind of not a problem per se. Eve finds herself, slowly being more and more attracted to Shep and kind of figuring out what is the definition of family. So I think that, going into this one, the biggest thing is that surprise pregnancy trope, which I actually don't mind. I know a lot of people it's like an absolute no for. Other people it's very much a likely no for. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I'm just kind of mid about it. I feel like if it's done well, it can be fine. This book, I've heard, is one of the better stories with that trope in it, so I am still looking forward to reading it, and I will definitely report back how it goes. Then the next book on my September TBR is Until I Get You by Claire Contreras. This I am reading with the Spoonie Readers on Instagram and YouTube. I will link that down below. I should say, I forgot to say this all the time, but I will link any public book clubs buddy reads accounts that I mentioned down below. So this book is a dark hockey romance, which I have never read before. I've actually only read a couple dark romances and a couple sports romances, but never combined, so this should be interesting. This is following a male main character who, from the synopsis, seems to me like has some like psychopathic tendencies. He is a college hockey star. Everyone loves him, and he has his eyes set on this one girl who doesn't really give him the time of day for the most part. So it seems like he becomes a little bit obsessive, and then he finally does get her. She, does go with him at some point, but then ultimately leaves him, and to him that is not okay. And it sounds like, again, then he goes down this very obsessive and revengeful period where, he wants to get back at her for leaving him of all people. Questioning how I will feel about this one. I don't always like a super possessive main character, but I will pretty much give anything a try. You never know. So a little bit conflicted, but again, I will report back, and who knows, maybe it'll surprise me. Then the next book I will be reading is The September House by Carissa Orlando. I am reading this book with the Thrills and Chills book club on Instagram and YouTube. And then I also happened to jump into a buddy read for this book as well, since I was already reading it, and I love a buddy read. So I'm excited to chat about this one with lots of people. This book is the perfect book for September, given the title, so I'm excited that I'm reading it at this time. This is about a house that is very much haunted, particularly in the month of September. Things happen like the walls drip blood. There is a group of, I think, like 3 people that are, happen to be on the streets during a certain time, and their life just seems unexciting, but the bookshop casts a little spell and transports them into living there during September. But Margaret is not most people, and she's not bothered by it, but after 4 years, Hal can just not take anymore, and he disappears. Their adult daughter, Catherine, shows up during September. She knows nothing of the hauntings and is trying to find her father. But now it is indeed September and the hauntings are ticking up. The house seems to be really, really trying hard to keep some secrets hidden. I am not a paranormal believer, so I'm interested to see how this book hits for me. But I have heard good things. I've heard it's even comical at times, which like the synopsis makes it seem just kind of spooky. I am not usually a seasonal reader, but I do enjoy when my books just happen to coincide with the right season, so that is like a fun aspect about this. My group reads, my buddy reads are definitely starting to trend towards fall and spooky season. I am holding on a little bit to summer, but I am still looking forward to all these cozy reads. Then the next book I'm going to share about is Apprentice to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. This is the sequel to Assistant to the Villain, which I have there, if you can see it. So I went ahead and bought the sequel. I am reading this one with the Stay at Home Mom Book Queen book club on Instagram and Discord. This, I believe, is supposed to pick up right where the first one left off, so I'm not going to get crazy into the synopsis for spoiler reasons, but if you haven't read the first one, Evie is an assistant to this man who is called the Villain, and he basically has this whole lair with a like HR committee and, you know, assistants, and like it's basically run like a business, and it's very fun in the way that it is described. So then in Apprentice, it's again picking up, there's stuff going on with the magic system. The villain is in trouble. The king, who is their arch nemesis, is after them, and now it's kind of up to Evie to help save the villain, save the manor, save the kingdom, maybe even. My always biggest recommendation for this series is to not go in blind. I have heard a number of people who went in expecting it to be a certain type of fantasy novel, and if you don't follow the author online, which you should because her videos are hilarious, and you didn't know what it was, I think it would be hard to read this book, and if like you weren't in the right mindset, you maybe would try to take it too seriously, and that's not what it's meant for. It's a silly, fun time. It is a cozy fantasy, a very, very, very slow burn. In the first book, I believe there was essentially no spice. They might have kissed by accident even, or not like accident, but like it wasn't, you know, a romantic kiss one time type thing, if I'm remembering correctly. So again, just don't go in expecting a high fantasy. This is a fun read. This is your palate cleanser, but I still highly recommend it. It is just go in when you're in that right mindset and you will have a lot of fun. Then the next book that I'm reading is with the book club next door on Fable and Instagram. This is The Lost Bookshelf by Evie Woods. The synopsis on Goodreads is a little bit sparse, but basically the gist is that in Dublin there is a lost bookshelf, kind of like a secret bookshelf that is waiting to be found, and their own adventure. They kind of realize that their life is more than what they realize. This is one of those things where I don't have a good synopsis because I don't really fully understand what it's going on. Again, part of that being that there's like a magical element as usual, and part of that being that the synopsis online just wasn't great and I didn't want to spoil anything by going to search. I did dive into the reviews a tiny bit just so I could get a better idea of what I was going into. It sounds like the biggest complaint was pacing and jumping timelines and characters, and that being like a little bit confusing, and then maybe just some like odd quirkiness in general. But those aspects don't always bother me because I read lots of books at a time. I often miss pacing issues. I am used to jumping between timelines and characters and even plots since I am, going back and forth between so many books. So I'll be interested to see if those things bother me as well. But the cover is super cute, and I love a bookish book, so I'm still excited to check it out and figure out what the real synopsis is. Hopefully I will have a better idea after I read it. Then the next book that I am reading in September is The Chain by Adrienne McKinty. This I am reading with a new book club, brand new, so if you want to join in on a new book club, it is on Fable, hosted by Where Is My Library Card on Instagram and TikTok, I think. Another account that if you are not following, you need to, because she posts the best bookish videos that are just very laugh out loud funny, and I definitely recommend. And I did grab this one from my library as well. I have a pretty decent library system near me, but I don't usually get this lucky about grabbing the books like actually at my local library, so I definitely scored for September. This book sounds terrifying. Every parent's worst nightmare. This is about a woman who, just an ordinary day, sends her child off to school and then gets a terrifying phone call from someone with proof that her daughter has been kidnapped. Basically, if the mom doesn't do exactly as this person says, then her daughter will be killed. The person on the other end of the line actually is a mother herself, and her son was kidnapped, and so basically her son also will be killed if this woman doesn't follow through. So you can kind of get a sense of where this like chain title is going. But basically, if Rachel does not find the money, find the victim, and then complete some horrible acts, then her daughter will die. So, and it just kind of keeps going. So really like an awful, like ethical, moral dilemma type book that as a mom is just making me cringe. I'm sure this is one that will keep me on the edge of my seat for sure. Certainly books about parenting and children and those emotions that are tied to that can be triggering. I don't really have any triggers that like I absolutely do not read, but I'm glad that I'm going into this one knowing that that's what it's about so that I can kind of protect my emotional state as I read. The next book that I'm going to be reading is for the Buzzword, which is hosted every year by Kayla from Books and Lala. This month's buzzword is to find a book with a sense in the title, meaning like, seeing, hearing, tasting, etc., etc. And this also is like broad enough that you can use words like ear or eye or like the body part that's associated with that sense. So I have picked The Diamond Eye by Kate Quinn. This book is set in World War II. It follows Mila, who is a history student, and when the Nazis invade Ukraine, she is called to join the war effort. She is given a rifle and becomes a sniper, and she actually gets the nickname Lady Death because she's actually really good at sniping. She continues this during the war, and when she makes her 300th kill, she really is acknowledged as a war hero. So she is sent to the United States on kind of this tour where she's praised. She becomes friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, who's the first lady at the time. She obviously is dealing with some likely PTSD elements though, especially just kind of being so suddenly removed from what she's been doing, and really 300 kills I'm sure would be pretty traumatizing to anyone, but especially to someone who was not on that path to be part of the military in the first place. So she's in the United States, but it sounds like there's some danger lurking in the shadows there as well. I already mentioned in this video that historical fiction is a sweet spot for me, but especially World War II. I don't know what it is about it, but the stories that are told are just so captivating. Authors just do a really great job with it, at least the ones that I've read, and I have read a lot. So I have heard really great things about this one. I read The Alice Network by the same author earlier this year, and I gave it 5 stars. So I have really enjoyed this author in the past, and I've heard great things about this one. And then this is another one that is based on a true story, which is just fascinating. So very excited to get to this one. There is a big group read of Abby Jimenez's backlog going on YouTube. And I really loved Just for the Summer, which was my first read of hers. So I was excited to jump in and read this. I'm finishing up The Friend Zone. And then for September, I will be adding the Happy Ever After playlist to my September TBR by Abby Jimenez. So this is the second novel. I believe it can be read as a standalone, but it seems like Abby Jimenez does likes to interconnect her stories to some extent. So this is following Sloane, who unfortunately lost her fiance a few years ago, and she's still struggling with that, understandably. It sounds like she comes across a pup, a little mischievous dog who maybe is lost, because it seems like she, tries to look for his owner, but nothing comes up for a little bit, and she starts enjoying the time with the dog while she's looking. But then after some time, she does get a message from the owner, and he wants his dog back. Sloane texts back and forth with this owner for a bit. Their texts are kind of flirty, bantery. They start really connecting, but she also doesn't want to give up the dog without a fight, and she doesn't know if her heart will be able to handle another heartbreak. Abby Jimenez is really fast becoming a favorite author for me. I love a romance that has that extra oomph to it, those extra things in life that make humans who we are. I have heard, as I mentioned, I loved Just for the Summer, and I've heard great things about this one, and I'm really excited to get to this one and her other ones as well. This one is available also on Kindle Unlimited if you want to join our group read. Then I have one more group read that I'm doing. I really just can't say no. Just for the group of people on Instagram, I'm going to be reading The Wedding People by Allison Espach. This I picked up from my book of the month for August, so I already have this one. This takes place in Newport, Rhode Island at some fancy venue where there is a very large wedding going on. This woman, Phoebe, shows up. She is dressed very fancy, but she is actually not here for the wedding. She just wanted one more extravagant night. She had plans to come here for a really long time, and she's kind of hit rock bottom and just really wanted to check it out. But as I said, she's not part of the wedding, but she is mistaken for part of the wedding. That being said, the bride, like brides do, has every little detail figured out and has every kind of bad case scenario thought out except for Phoebe and Phoebe's plan. That being said, these two women end up connecting, and they confide in each other, and it sounds like it should be an interesting story. I have been hearing really good things about this one. Newport is actually one of my favorite places to visit, and we vacationed there for a week this summer with my family, so I'm excited to go back as I read, and this book sounds kind of funny, so I am looking forward to it. Then from my own personal TBR, I always pick the next highest rated book on my TBR, my like large general TBR list. If it is a sequel out of order, then that just becomes a placeholder for the next book in the series, and I will read the next book in the series. Of course, I'm not going to be reading books out of order. So when I was going through my list, the next book, highest rated book on my TBR, is another Brandon Sanderson book. So I haven't read it yet, but so I had Elantris on my TBR in a previous month, which I will be getting to soon as it's finally catch up on my rollover. And then the next book in the Cosmere is The Hope of Elantris. This actually isn't a book, it is a short story, but in the list it is like the second story. So I am going to take the win. It is only 25 pages, and I actually don't even think you can get like a physical copy of it, but he has it on his website for free. So easy. It is picking up a plot hole, I guess, from Elantris and filling in some details. It sounds like it was always somewhat planned that way. So it's meant to be read after reading Elantris. So I don't have like a real synopsis since I haven't read that yet. And as like such a short story, I didn't want to confuse myself or spoil anything. So no synopsis, but that is what I will be reading as far as like my next highest rated book. Luckily, when I do finish Elantris, this should be a pretty quick one to insert. Then from just my personal TBR, I always put on every month the next book in Goodreads Best Books Ever list. This is a challenge that I'm doing for myself, similar to my rating TBR. If there is a sequel or anything, then I will just put the next one. For this month, the next on Goodreads Best Books Ever is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. So this is obviously a children's story. I don't know if I have actually ever read Alice in Wonderland, but I have certainly seen the Disney adaptation, and I've read like miniature books of it, like the Golden Books versions and things like that. But I don't know if I've ever actually read Lewis Carroll's version. I think I've only done the Disney version. So I'm excited. I feel like everyone knows the story of Alice in Wonderland, but it's about a girl who sees a white rabbit pull a pocket watch out of his waistcoat and saying, "I'm late," and she watches him dive through a hole, and she follows after him, and all this crazy events happen. I'm not sure if Through the Looking Glass, I mean, that's supposed to be the sequel, but if it's like a completely different novel, or if the Alice in Wonderland that we know is both of those books combined. So I am looking forward to another like fairly easy read to add to my TBR, and when I get to that one, that should just be a fun one. I may even read it with my kids. Then the last book that I'm putting on from my personal TBR is that I always put up the next longest book on my physical shelf that I own. So this can jump around a little bit, because if I pick up a new book and it happens to be longer, then I might jump back up, and that was the case this month, which is why I'm mentioning it. I will be reading The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This is 565 pages, so we're jumping back up a little bit. I had gotten my books all in the 400s, but I picked up a couple bigger ones, so towards the end of the year I have a couple bigger ones, and then next year we'll be jumping back into the 400s hopefully. This takes place in Florida in the 1950s, so another historical fiction. This follows Robbie who is a 12-year-old boy. He has been sentenced to 6 months at the reformatory for kicking the son of the largest landowner in defense of his sister. Robbie has a talent for seeing ghosts. So when he is at the reformatory, this is a really eye-opening experience into the horrors that occur here. Whereas before, after his mother passed away, seeing ghosts was a comfort to him. That is not going to be the case any longer as he goes to this place during, we're talking about the South, Jim Crow laws. There's a lot going on. And Robbie is really just figuring out how to survive these 6 months. As I said, this is a horror historical fiction. There also is a horror element to it, so a little bit of a cross genre, which is always fun. And I believe the synopsis said that this is somewhat based on a true story. So my guess is the historical elements and maybe even like this reformatory school are true, but obviously the paranormal elements are likely the fiction that's added in. But as I read it and kind of figure that out, I'm excited to learn more about this. Then the last couple books that I'm reading are all advanced reader copies. 2 I am definitely reading in September. 1 I will probably not get to in October, but I am putting it on my September TBR, so I'll chat about it now. The first book is Wished by Sarah Reddy. That may sound familiar because I read her 3rd book in this like standalone series called the Ghosted series. And I finished it, I believe, in July, so I talked about it in my July wrap-up video. That was Fated, and I really, really enjoyed that one. These are all magical realism type books. So these are romances with some magical elements to them. So in this one, this is following Anna, who is a hopeless romantic. She believes in love at first sight, and she is in love with this guy named Max. They are from 2 completely different worlds, essentially. He is a famous jewelry store owner, and she cleans houses. So he doesn't even know she exists. So this is all like very much made up in her fantasy, this love at first sight thing. However, she makes a wish and it comes true. She is now married to Max. Everyone believes that she is. They've been married for years. It's everything that she wanted it to be, and then the synopsis says, or was it? So maybe like a kind of like be careful what you wish for scenario, or, it should be interesting. I really, as I said, enjoyed Fated. I really like Sarah Reddy's writing, and I haven't actually read the 1st and 2nd book in the series, but I would love to, and they all have that like magical realism aspect, all different. Fated was about falling in love with a guy in her dreams. The 1st book, Ghosted, I think is about falling in love with the ghost. I forget what the 2nd one is. So they're all these romances with just a little bit of a twist. So I'm excited to read this one. Then the next advanced reader copy that I will be reading in September is called Rinkmates by Nova Banks. This is a hockey romance, not the dark hockey romance like the other book. This is following Riley, who is the hockey player. He's in a little bit of trouble for sounds like some bar fights, just he needs like a PR refresh. He's been kind of getting into too much trouble lately as a professional. And then we also have Leora, who is an ex-Olympic figure skater who has big dreams that just don't seem to be coming true. So Leora decides to join this new reality TV show called Grace on Ice, which is pairing professional figure skaters with celebrities. So you can imagine maybe that she ends up getting paired with Riley, and they also enter into a fake dating relationship to improve images and kind of mutually help each other out with their situations. But obviously real sparks start flying and their relationship moves on from there. I am a big Dancing with the Stars fan, or at least I used to be. I haven't watched it in a few seasons, but I used to really enjoy it. I love dance. So this to me is giving Dancing with the Stars, but make it figure skating, and I was sold. I think this sounds so fun. I'm really looking forward to this one, and I can't wait to share. Then the very last book on my September TBR is the advanced reader copy for A New Lease on Death by Olivia Black. This is about Ruby, who buys an apartment in Boston, and it's not the greatest apartment. There's lots of fixing that's needed. There is crime going on, and it comes with a ghost. So we're really in our like paranormal era here in my TBR. The ghost's name is Cordelia, and she is kind of bored, just like being stuck in this apartment. But when her like across the way neighbor gets murdered, she wants to help figure out what happened to him, but given that she is dead herself, she can't do that alone, so she enlists the new person, Ruby, who just moved in, to help her out, and so this kind of unlikely duo works to solve this murder. This sounds like a fun, cozy mystery, perfect for, like, again, end of September, October setting, and I am looking forward to reading it. So that is it for my September TBR. I am really looking forward to reading most of these books, and even the ones that I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if that'll be my vibe, I still think that they sound really interesting, and I love trying new things and new authors and group reading and buddy reading and everything, so I think it should be a fun time. Feel free to leave any books that you are reading in September down in the comments, and if you are not feeling super chatty, go ahead and leave me a ghost emoji for all the ghosty paranormal books that I happen to be reading in September, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!